Welcome to the Fangled Cast, brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand. Welcome back to the Fangled Cast. Today should be interesting. The guy that we're talking to today, whose name is Matt Rogers, is someone who I had to stalk on the internet. And I say that because I read an article that caught my eye and fit right into something that we were talking about in a client meeting about the difference between what people believe is capitalism and what is corporatism, and how there's some confusion in the market. And in a corporatist economy, how are companies supposed to compete? So before we get going here, I just want to introduce and have Matt tell you a little bit about who he is. Who are you, Matt?
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is the kind of stalking that I do appreciate. I was very excited to hear from you, and I'm very happy to finally be on Fangled Tech, and I'm glad we could finally come up with a time to get together. My name, to everybody listening, my name is Matt Rogers. I am a professor of innovation and leadership. I live and teach internationally, and I am studying for my PhD in business psychology.
Oh, interesting. You know, for folks who are wondering what I'm talking about stalking, so I read an article as I was looking for information on this topic for a project, and came across an item on a website called the International Policy Digest that Matt had written back in 2017 about how people confuse what is real capitalism with what is corporatism, and what we're talking about is really interesting, because in a true capitalist society, which I'm absolutely a proponent of, all of the things that our major corporations are doing wouldn't exist. And it's fascinating to me how we get confused and how it affects how we do business. Because really, in a corporatist society, we have businesses that spend a great deal of what they earn on lobbying and crafting laws that benefit them, rather than a free market economy. And with that, there comes certain, I don't know what the best way to say would be, certain restrictions that you have to be aware of when you're building your go-to-market strategy, so that you can compete against those guys who have stacked the cards in their favor. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit, Matt, about what inspired you to write the article, and give us a little more information about it.
Well, absolutely. I was actually, when you wrote me about the article, I had actually forgotten about it. Meaning it wasn't fresh in my mind. It's, oh, wow, you read that and you're reaching back. Thank you. I was really thinking a lot about this for a couple of different reasons, and for a very long time, because everybody condemns capitalism as this horrible evil in the world. And I really disagree with that. Capitalism as an idea has done more to bring people out of poverty, to advance society, because there is a very human-centric desire, almost instinct, to achieve and to create. And Adam Smith said it best, I believe, with self-interest. We are all motivated by some sort of self-interest. Yet, at a certain point, these companies cross over a line and they enter corporatism. And being a corporation is not necessarily corporatism. I don't have exact details of how I would divide these, and I'm well aware of the irony that we are doing this on a corporation's platform on Zoom, and we're going to be posting it on corporate social media. And I don't know if we could live without those. But in essence, sorry, I thought were you gonna?
I was. Would you agree that when capitalism stops being capitalism is when companies stop reinvesting their profits in better product, better delivery, better service, and instead in buying privilege through bureaucracy?
I would not have come up with that myself, because I don't think that way. I think more from the perspective of the startup, but I would agree with that assessment completely. Corporations don't want competition. They really don't. Corporations hate competition because competition is it's costly for them. It forces them to continually reinvent themselves, makes them have to work harder. And we benefit more in every single way from competition. But the major organizations, no, they don't. And it is easier for them. It's more efficient for them to buy protection in government. And they don't care if the government is leftist or rightist or centrist. They just care that politicians are willing to accept their campaign contributions.
Yep. Yeah, and not to get, and we won't get into a partisan discussion at all, but there's almost a parallel to it, and it's something that I've always said in the political spectrum, is everybody loves democracy until they finally get in power, and then they're not such fans of it anymore. It's the same with
exactly
with these guys. So imagine, for example, a model today where you want to, I don't know, go into become the new phone company who's providing fiber internet service in a neighborhood. What do you come up against? You come up against the cable company that's had a contract with the municipality since the 70s that can't be broken. You've got another company that owns the phone lines, and a total inability for you to compete in that market is an example of what we're talking about. Can you think of some other examples of where corporatist companies are creating those impossibilities to compete?
Absolutely. Some extremely recent ones. Apple and Google forming their silent but secret agreement, where Apple used Google search, which just automatically kills any innovator's ability or desire to create a new search algorithm and new search functions, because Google owns, I believe, 86% of all global search.
Yep. The number one search on the internet, Google. Number two, YouTube, owned by Google.
Yeah. Owned by Google, exactly. Amazon. Amazon is crossing over from being a startup, a vibrant startup type of company, to a company geared towards world domination. And I know it sounds like I'm a conspiracy theorist saying that, but if you look at their business practices, they control every single person that wants to sell on their platform.
Yep.
So
are you familiar with the case study? Are you familiar with the case study on Amazon from diapers.com? And I may be inaccurate.
Diapers.com.
So the story as I understand it, and I may have some inaccuracies in this, I got to be a little careful. But there was a website, diapers.com, and Amazon attempted to purchase them, and they said no. And rather than purchase them using completely legal things that were created through lobbying, Amazon was able to take over their suppliers and sell below cost long enough to put them out of business, and then buy them for pennies on the dollar. And it was done completely legally within the framework of what lobbyists had created within the antitrust laws.
I'm not familiar with that, but I'm familiar with the situation and what happens, because Microsoft did the exact same thing in the 90s as they rose to their own extreme levels of power and control. And something that Amazon is doing with other organizations as well. They created something called the Alexa Fund. And I don't know if you or your audience are familiar with the Alexa Fund, but it was their venture capitalist arm. And with some organizations, not all, but some organizations, the really valuable ones, they would invite them in, get all of their information, and then ignore them and just develop the platform or the software themselves. I know that Amazon has started creating their own clothing lines and their own publishing lines and all of these other lines of business that are in direct competition with the organizations that are making the bulk of their money through selling on Amazon.
Yeah, and
they're underpricing them.
And prior to Amazon, it was Walmart who was telling suppliers. Walmart was telling suppliers, we'll buy your product, but you have to have a plan to reduce price by a certain amount every year. And when you can't do that anymore, we'll just go to China and make it ourselves. And
absolutely,
there are manufacturers, I understand, who have separate models just for Walmart because they couldn't afford to sell them their regular product and be able to meet the price reduction.
It happens consistently, and it's just because with a Walmart, You could still compete a little more directly by providing better service and something that is much more customized as a shopping experience. If you were a smaller retailer, also if you're a little bit further away from a Walmart, you had that opportunity as
Mm-hmm.
well. We don't have that with Google, Facebook, or Twitter, or Amazon, or any of these other tech companies. I it's difficult to talk about this. They all benefited from capitalism. They all benefited
Mm-hmm.
from innovation in the free market. Yet now, as they've grown to this position of power, they want to be in a position to control their competition.
Yeah, very, very clearly so. And using corporatist, not capitalist means to do it, which is where we have where the conversation is sort of leading.
Yeah.
Many times we get clients who used to be like, for example, if you were going after the shampoo market, you were dealing with these major players, the JC Levers and those guys in the Palmolives in the market, and now they've combined and become even bigger companies. But but the differentiation is one of the main strategies to try to compete. I joke that the secret is sneak attack. You've got to get
Yeah.
you've got to be the best kept secret until you're big enough to be able to fight.
Yeah.
What other kinds of strategies are you familiar with? That
Uh, well, number one, and there's a couple of different ones. Number one, if you're in any way a tech company,
mm-hmm.
and most organizations, whether you're a small business or a startup itself, uh, should have some component of technology. Do your research. I don't have off the top of my head the exact places to go for this, but a lot of the technology that was used to create, say, Airbnb and Uber, it's open source technology.
Sure.
So find that technology and build on it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you like it, I'm happy to do this later today, tomorrow, sometime this week. Send a list to you about all of these different organizations or all this different open source technology that can help your listeners.
You know, it would be great if you do send that. I'll include it in the notes on when we put this
Okay.
up on YouTube.
Most definitely. So that would be number one, is to learn about that open source technology.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, understand that you're not going to knock one of them off by yourself. That should not be your goal. Focus on chipping away a portion of their business. So if you are, if you're going after McDonald's, well, why do people shop at McDonald's? It's not because it's good. It's because it's fast and it's hot. Well, you're not going to be able to compete with fast and hot. So how can you create something that those people might be looking for that you can start chipping away a little bit? The goal should be to chip away a little bit yourself. And that hopefully is going to create the opportunity for somebody else to then start chipping away another little bit and another little bit.
Yeah. And I think if you're, like you said, if your goal is to knock them off, you're fooling yourself. But
Exactly.
many times the key is to be able to figure out what it is that they're not doing well and create a niche to do it better than they can.
Yep. Exactly. But it's going to be, but even with that, like, as you said, you want to fly under the radar, because if they catch wind of it, they do have the capacity to fix that,
Mm-hmm.
or to go after another area where they do very well, but they can lower that price to keep you out.
Yep. Yeah. It seems that the one of the biggest challenges out there is that predatory move of
Yep.
we'll just sell below cost because we can afford it while this guy dies, which is a totally anti-competitive corporatist move.
It absolutely is, but I would argue that was also one of Porter's five forces. That was strength of partnerships in this. Yeah, strength of partnerships, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
where we can collude and we can reduce our prices and you can reduce your prices to kill this one startup or these startups that are entering the industry,
Yeah.
and then we just raise our prices back up again.
Yeah. At my company, the first stage of any consultation and marketing with our folks and business consulting is to really dig into, who is your customer and what are their pains and concerns. And in that is the magic that then when you look at who you are as a company, the ones of those that you can resolve or serve that the big guys can't is your inroad.
Absolutely. I'm in my classes and even with clients that I work with as entrepreneurs, my focus is more understand and communicate your identity. And within your identity, you are going to be able to find that underserved market
Mm-hmm.
and be specific with it. It's no longer about age or gender. It's about lifestyle. It's about belief. It's about how is my product enhancing your life?
Mm-hmm.
How is it making it better? It could be business or it could be personal, but how is this helping you be a better you?
Yeah, and are you solving a problem that people know they have, or are
Yep.
you going to have them first recognize the problem, or they're not going to buy your service or product, which is
In my experience,
a whole other conversation.
in my experience, most people don't know they have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it should be communication, asking questions. Are you the type of person who wants this and feels it's lacking, however it might be? We're not going to be able to get into all the details of
Sure,
that,
sure.
but really build on helping them realize that they have not only that they have a problem, but that problem is frustrating them in ways they have not thought about,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to remove that problem.
Yeah, recently I was
Ideally,
looking.
get them to self to themselves.
Yeah, recently I was looking at a model for a used car dealership that also has the ability to negotiate new cars. And
Oh, nice.
his business is growing like crazy because he finally figured out that there really is an entire population of people that want concierge service without feeling like they're about to get ripped off at every moment along the path of the car purchase. So his proposition is, if I know what you want, we'll figure out what the cost is up front, and then I'll go out and get it for you. And there won't be a guy trying to upsell you garbage that you don't need for your car. I'm not going to hide points in the loan, and we're going to make this into a situation to where you tell me what you want, you're going to get exactly what you want with none of the stress of buying a car, and I'll show you the documentation. It's a great deal, and that's his business model. And
And
it
I think
turns
that's a
out,
great business model.
and you know what? It turns out that when you do the research into people's pains in the car buying market, especially among the female population, they feel like every step of the way at almost any car dealership in this country, they're walking on a minefield. They walk in the level of tension. So what he's doing is he's giving them an experience of being able to buy a car with absolutely no stress. And that's how he's
Yeah.
competing with these massive car dealers. Now his challenge is when they love the deals, but if they see it taking away from their profit margins, it could come to an end because they control the flow.
Yeah. And that's they do, but hopefully uh, when they get to that point, this used car client that you're talking about is able to adapt again
Mm-hmm.
and is able to recognize that problem and figure it out. And I personally love that. If I was, and I am, we're planning on moving back to the US, hopefully sometime soon. If we're able to find, if we're in that area, I would definitely use that service because I don't want to go in. I
Yeah.
don't want to feel like I'm a predator. Being preyed upon. I want to be able to
Yeah.
just buy the car, feel good about it, understand that I have to pay something. They need to make a profit,
Mm-hmm.
but I want it all up front. I don't want
Yeah.
to have all the surprises.
Yep. And the mistake I think most people make when they go to compete against these corporatist environments is they think that it's all about the price.
Yeah.
I could never compete because these guys are always going to be able to be cheaper than me. And the reality is, if in this current society and has for a long time, if the experience is significantly better, people will pay
Mm-hmm.
for it because there's value.
I agree. I
Every
agree
every,
completely.
every town has a supermarket that's dented cans and cheap, and then they have that one luxury with the pre-prepared food that's better than you get at a restaurant, and the prices are higher, and they're busy
Yeah.
and they make money because there's people that are willing to pay for that level of feeling like a person. Uh,
However, and to build on that, I think one of the biggest obstacles I've seen with small businesses is they're afraid, they don't trust themselves enough, and they don't
mhm.
trust their real value. So they've convinced themselves. Now we're talking about the whole, not individuals,
Mhm.
but as a whole, small businesses have convinced themselves that it's only about price.
Yep.
So they're not willing to look at other opportunities. They're not willing to look at other ideas. They don't trust their market because they've convinced themselves. It's not the market that said, we're only going to shop here because it's cheap. But they've convinced themselves, you're only shopping here because it's cheap.
Yep.
And that's a fallacy.
It really is. I mean, at the end of the day, the core of our coaching is to help companies convert everyone they touch into a voracious advocate for their brand. And brand advocates are willing to pay a premium and the exclusivity of dealing with someone who provides that level of service that you would want to be an advocate for their brand. It's a great way of dealing with the corporatist market, except where they've created such barriers to trade that you can't even get your foot in the door.
Which goes back to the whole concept of the corporatist. Corporatists want to block up the supply chains. They want to do everything possible. This is why the corporations are so pro increasing the minimum wage. And to look at it only from that perspective, they don't care about how much it's going to cost because they have all of the resources needed to be able to automate a massive portion of that. And lay off all of those people that thought they were getting, a huge raise. All of a sudden, nope, they're gone because they can simply automate the entire process. What that minimum wage increase is actually doing, and we're seeing it in Seattle, and we're seeing it in San Francisco and all these other places. It's killing small businesses. It's killing entrepreneurship because they cannot afford to be able to pay more than 2 or 3 people that salary, which ultimately is going to have an effect on the job market.
Going back to the model that we started talking about, the cable television, back in the 60s and 70s, they were providing a pay television because you had over-the-air television with minimal channels, and they came out with this innovation, and they bought up all the telephone poles. So every neighborhood had its cable company. In most cases, you only had a choice of one. And then satellite came out. And when satellite came out, the cable companies had to scramble. But because of the laws that they worked to create that made it difficult for people in their neighborhoods to get satellites, they were able to hold it off for a period of time. Then finally the satellite companies came in. What happened? The big corporates, they came together as the same companies. Then the internet was coming out, and there were other options besides having it through the cable and created. So there's been these innovations have sort of screwed up the game, sort of peed in the soup, as they say, of the corporatist model that's keeping people out. And then another innovation comes. Now that the cable companies are overpriced, the satellite and the internet streaming services are out, the cut the cord movement started. So now if you have an antenna in your house, you can pick up. That's what I have in my house. I don't have cable. I pick up all the local networks. And the corporatists got them to change their frequencies and move their locations to make it more difficult for people with antennas. So there's this constant play. And the argument for me, if it was truly a capitalist society, what they would be looking to do instead of that is, how do we make our services so much better that nobody would want to leave? But that isn't the mindset.
No, it isn't, because it doesn't have to be. Because, and again, this is not Republican or Democrat.
No.
We have this is just, they have the right people in Congress. And those right people go from the gamut of far left to far right. They have the right people in Congress who are working for them. Everybody's aware. It was last week that social media giants were called to Congress to talk about the censoring and their actions. Of course they want regulations. They're begging for it. Number one, the government does not have the number of people needed to create legitimate and fair regulations. So Facebook and Twitter are going to step right up and say, hey, we'll help. So what they're going to do is they're going to write the regulations to protect themselves and kill every other type of organization that's growing up.
It's kind of like the polluted streams next to the coal mine that regulates itself.
Exactly.
It's the same. And by the way, this gets posted about a month after. So when people hear you say a week, they're going to go, that was more than that. So if you're thinking that, it was a week ago, but this was recorded at the end of October, beginning of November. So Just
So, okay. And I appreciate that. So we're recording this on November 2nd, day before chaos is going to happen. So hopefully the country's happy in a month.
yeah. Well, if all goes well, I'll be able to post this in a month. So.
All right. um,
And
so,
either way.
you know, as we're looking at it, and I did a lot of research about this in preparation for this.
Sure.
Many of us who are capitalists or say we're capitalists don't truly understand what being a capitalist is. And being a capitalist means you have to have some sort of capital.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, number one, that there is a confusion that way. Most of us should be more defining ourselves as being free market advocates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
And that is something that I do have this belief, and it might sound a little corny. I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of the big four: Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Apple. I don't think we are. I think they're too big. Their tentacles are in everything, and I think for the first time, they have crossed over in terms of capital themselves. Trillions of dollars in valuations, influence with government, influence with us as people. Those might be losing battles unless you're content having an extremely microscopic share. But at the flip side, I'm guessing your viewers and your listeners are familiar with the Fourth Industrial Revolution and digital transformation.
Sure.
I see this as an opportunity to renew what really is capital. Now, granted, we would be operating under this ceiling, this technical ceiling. But number one, we're going to see a massive reduction over the next 20 years in the workforce as companies become more automated. Yet, instead of looking at this as a negative, we can look at it as an opportunity to make use of this technology that a lot of it is open source. And through these platforms, build a new life for ourselves, one that is much more smaller. Sure, it's going to be smaller, but it's going to be happier. It's going to be more impactful, and we're going to have greater passion and purpose and fulfillment in our lives.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You say the big four, and if you had done that, I don't know, 5 years ago, Microsoft would have been in that four. Yeah. And if you go back further, let's talk about the biggest retailers out there, Sears, JCPenney. Mm-hmm. So there are possibilities where someone can innovate so well that they make that change, but it certainly doesn't happen quickly. So
it is, and I will always agree with that. It's always going to be possible for you, myself, for somebody to come up with that next transformational, disruptive, next curve idea. And I'm a full advocate for it. It's just becoming much harder, simply because it's going to be tech based. Mm-hmm. That next globally transformative idea is going to be tech based, and these companies, it's going to take a very strong personality to say no when Amazon is offering $500 million to buy your IP, or $1 billion or $5 billion to buy your IP. Knowing that they can reverse engineer it, or they can simply do something to compete with you at that same time. Yep. So it's going to be much more difficult. I think not impossible. I don't believe anything's impossible.
Yeah. The next big transformational thing that's coming down the pike that I see is the satellite high-speed internet is going to just all
5G. Yep.
No, what the folks at Tesla are working on.
Oh, okay.
Satellite-based internet where you won't need any of the hardwired anything down here. Everything will pop off the satellite. Satellite phones, they tried, I can't remember what year that was, back in the 90s, and it failed, and now the technology's caught up. So it'll be interesting to see where that leads. And then talk about a difficult market to penetrate. Not too many of us can raise the capital to throw a satellite up there.
Exactly.
Anyhow,
but I think that's a great thing. And Tesla, I would probably say, is the next level down. But I would actually consider Elon Musk much more of a Nikolai Tesla than Thomas Edison, where I'd categorize all the other ones as Thomas Edisons. Mm-hmm. He's more focused on creating the changes and doing the things that people say can't be done than acquiring the market. She's still interested in that. Don't get me wrong. This is not black or white, but compared to the others, he's much more driven by something a little bit different. And I think that's a little bit admirable.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's people who are not advocates of him, see him as a big rent seeker, who all of his businesses were basically funded by us. But I really don't have an opinion either way. I don't know enough to make an intelligent statement about that. Anyhow, we're just about out of time, so I got to ask you my favorite question.
Absolutely.
What should I have asked you that I didn't ask you?
So how does the small business survive?
Yes.
Or thrive or become a startup? Focus on yourself is what I would say. Understand what you can control and what you cannot control. Really explore ways that you can create that different experience. And be willing to use this technology.
Mm-hmm.
It is a platform that's either free or extremely low cost that can help you. Be willing to take risks. Be willing to fail and learn from it. And become, even if you're a carpenter or if you're a brewer or if you make artisanal soaps or technology, be passionately interested in your industry. Find out what other people are doing and how you can use those to make your business more efficient.
Interesting. So if folks wanted to reach out to find you, how can they find you?
On LinkedIn, I believe I'm Matt Rogers.
Yep.
And my email address is very simple. It's matt.f as in Frederick, matt.f.rogers@gmail.com. Contact me. And
I'll put all that stuff in the links too, so people will be able to find it.
Right.
Fantastic.
And I will work on, my pleasure. And I will look on that open source technology that and send you the links for that as well.
That'd be great. Well, this was really a pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation greatly. I'm so glad I was able to.
Thank you so much.
To find you down in Colombia so we could have this chat.
I was extremely happy to be here. Thank you so much. Excuse the little kids running around. It's kind of a rainy day, so they're a little bit bored.
I hear you. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
My pleasure, Andrew. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Brought to you by Fangle Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand.